Good morning. Well, actually, it's good evening. It's August the 17th, 2019. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. This is your host, Michael J. Long, Michael J. Long. Today, I decided to make this podcast a very special podcast, being that I haven't podcasted in a while. So I wanted to first uh, make a list of all the bad things that former President Obama, has done, and make a list and compare that to Trump's presidency. And at least that's where I would like to get started. So, number one, with the Obama presidency, you had the Affordable Health Care Act, Common Core, Dodd-Frank, all these bad policies, laws and executive orders that were passed. You had the Benghazi scandal, in which you had the State Department and Hillary Clinton just sort of under the Obama administration abandoning troops in I don't know if it was Syria or wherever it was that Benghazi is located in. I guess there was this military base, and instead of evacuating the troops in that base, or embassy, if you will, they leave the troops behind. And a lot of these policies that were pushed through by the Obama administration, the way he sort of governed this country or resided over this country, it was really actually a mess. But you had, the the Democrats kicked the Republicans out in the House and Senate before passing the Affordable Health Care Act, which Obama signed into law and did not question whether it was passed by a two-thirds majority, one-third majority. Two-thirds majority, one-third minority. Now, the fact of the matter was the Affordable Health Care Act was ruled constitutional as a tax, even though that was argued that it wasn't a tax in this by, so if it, but under the Constitution, tax laws are supposed to start in the House because the House of Representatives is the closest to the people, and make its way to the Senate. If it passes and moves on to the Senate, then it's supposed to be the Senate that passes it before it's signed into law by the president and or vetoed. But you had a lot of bad policies, and a lot of his foreign policy was a mess. I'm not really a big fan of the Affordable Health Care Act, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not really a big fan of Common Core, and these are all laws and policies that make the federal government a lot bigger than it has to be. Plus, you have to keep into consideration, too, that the Obama administration also signed into law the renewal of the Patriot Act, and on top of that, the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, and various proponents of laws and regulations that he had his whole executive branch in charge of, right? And he was in favor of pushing for gun control and all that. He made a lot of poor decisions. He pushed for a lot of bad policies, and even though he fought hard to have the Affordable Health Care Act passed, it doesn't, and the only way that they were able to get it passed was to kick the Republicans out of the room, which the Republicans are already currently doing with Democrats, right? So it goes to show you just how big this corruption is, and especially the way it was at the time. So you had a lot of bad policies that were pushed through under his administration, and not to mention the whole Bundy Ranch ordeal, in which thousands of armed citizens united to defend that guy's right to keep his private property. And the way that came about was Harry Reid and the Democratic Party wanted to take that land for use for, green energy renewal, whatever it is they wanted to do with that land. And it never happened. So that's one of the major outcomes that came from this stubborn defense, if you will. But I can't say that the whole of the Obama regime was really that much of a mess compared to Trump. And some good things did come out of his presidency, like DACA, which was which if it was allowed to remain in, which was passed in Congress before being signed into law by the president Obama, which would have actually, if Trump hadn't gotten rid of it with the executive order, would have actually allowed for children that came here through no fault of their own, or born through no fault of their own, the right to stay here and be given a pathway to legal residency and or U.S. citizenship, at least from somewhere down the road, at least from my understanding of it. Libertarian parties probably got a more broader definition and understanding of what that law is about. So I'm only going off of the Libertarian Party's support for what they've said about it. But, so you had that, and you had, he was softening relations with Cuba, trying to get Congress to lift the embargo we had on Cuba, which we still have on Cuba, which I don't know if I was in favor of it at the time, but I'd be pretty much in favor of it to this day. That and shutting down Guantanamo Bay, which we should have which he should have continued to do until it was successful, actually having Guantanamo Bay shut down. Obama did make the attempt to do that, but then reversed his decision to have Guantanamo Bay shut down, and that was all ultimately a big mistake on his part. So I would say, of all the stuff that Obama got done, 90% of it, 90 to 80% of it, I was pretty much against, and still am against, a lot of those policies. I don't think, what I'm trying to say here is, I don't think Obama was an entire waste of time on the Iran-American treaty, in terms of actually getting Iran to trade with us in the world in exchange for decreasing their nuclear weapons. But one has to, and I think as far as getting them to reduce their nuclear weapons deal, that was the most effective trade we had under the Obama administration, that the Trump administration turned around and gotten rid of because of the claims that they violated the treaty and all that other stuff under the Trump administration. So there were some good things that Obama did, but 90% of it was just bullshit. 80% of it, 90% just garbage. But let's compare that to the Trump administration, right? So you had a liberal Democrat in power for 8 years, and then Trump, the GOP Republican, comes along, and what do you get? You get gun control disguised as gun rights. So it's really actually the difference between Obama's gun control schemes and Trump's gun control Obama-like schemes, if you will. There's really, first of all, Trump waited 2 years before deciding to get us out of the small arms treaty, which Obama got us into, which I was very much against then and very much against the small arms deal now. But why wait 2 years for it? To get 2-3 years just to withdraw from that particular treaty when we should have withdrawn from it all along, from the very first time he was inaugurated. And I'll tell you this much: he was right to get us out of the Paris Accord agreement, but he was right to get us out of the small arms treaty. The problem is that he often hesitated on withdrawing us from those policies and agreements and such. But here's where Trump's going wrong. You had the El Paso shooting, now he wants to curve putting more restrictive regulations and registrations of gun right of people selling guns and all that. He wants to restrict your Second Amendment rights. And then he disguises that as, pro Second Amendment. I don't get how you can do such a thing like that. Plus the fact that Trump's foreign policy with appointing John Bolton is to go to war and bomb other countries all around the world. And you have to keep in mind, this is the same exact garbage that Obama has done. I don't really, particularly, for the most part, I don't really see a whole lot of I don't really see that big of a difference between what the Obama administration has tried to do with foreign policy and most domestic policies, bailing out the auto industry, passing the Affordable Health Care Act, which Trump just gave up on getting rid of, right? I don't really see that big of a difference between the two regimes, if you will, between the Obama regime and the Trump regime. It's basically the same garbage, except Trump is more of a nationalistic. He's using more nationalistic standards on this sort of stuff. So, like, for instance, Trump's bombing and wanting to buy Greenland from Denmark, and it's a mess. And then he imposes restrictions on Cuba and imposes turfs and turfs, all kinds of stuff. Sanctions, that's the biggest thing that we have against China, Cuba, Venezuela. This is all being done unilaterally by the Trump administration. Mexico, okay. And what effect has it had on this country? Well, it increases the prices. So when you go and want a certain product that came from one of those countries, you're paying a higher price for them. It's affecting us with jobs and all that, in certain industries. In order to feed most Americans, the free market has to rely on hiring U.S. citizens or documented immigrants and then most of them don't want to work the same amount of hours with the lowest amount of wages that an illegal immigrant might want to work for and whatever. But this trade deal, all these trade backing out of deals and all this, I'm going to summarize my whole message here on this podcast by saying there really isn't a dime's worth of difference. I believe Chuck Baldwin and Pat Buchanan had it best when they said there isn't a dime's worth of difference between the Democrats and the Republican Party, because there really isn't. I mean, everything that Obama's done, Trump's currently doing. With the renewal of the Patriot Act, the NDAA, the foreign policy is the same. And it's just the only difference is the rhetoric, and the rhetoric is more nationalistic and anti-freedom. I don't see why conservatives would want to go out and support this guy when all he is an extension of the Obama administration. That's basically what the Trump administration is, and the fact that he's got white skin color on him so he can get away with, oh, I'm Caucasian, I don't care about what your skin color is. What I care about is that at the end of the day, we're all free to decide for ourselves what we choose to eat, what we choose to do with our own bodies, how we choose to raise our children. We're not getting that kind of policy we haven't gotten it under the Obama administration. We haven't gotten it under the Trump administration so far. And so far, we never We never had gotten those policies under the the Bush administration. And the Bush administration was what got us started with the Iraq War. We're just making one mess after the other with foreign policy, and that's got to change. We should get rid of the Federal Reserves. We should get rid of the IRS and the income tax and replace it with a more simpler tax system where we can eventually reduce the taxes, reduce the size of the government, and ensure that people are empowered to live their lives the way they want, so long as they don't impose danger, force, or fraud to others. And that's the type of government that I want. I don't want all this extra nationalistic, we got to get involved with Venezuela, we got to get involved with Honduras, and send these groups of people back. But after we do regime change in those countries, so yeah, I'd like to talk more about it. So, but anyways, no, I think this is a mess. What we got currently under the Trump administration is just as much of a mess as what we had under the Obama administration. Although I will give Obama credit. He was a very excellent speaker, and he was very honest about what he wanted, which was to expand the size of the government, which, to be honest with you, I don't want. I don't need big government. I want less government. So, but this just goes to show you, while they're both in favor of big government, one's more honest about it than the other. And you can kind of guess, well, who's more honest about wanting big government? Well, the Democrats are, because they're more in your face about it. Even Chuck Baldwin, when he was running on behalf of the Constitution Party, kind of bought it out during his campaign. That in one of his speeches that he gave, that the Democrats are truly more honest about what they push for. I mean, you can even see it today with, AOC and this Green New Deal and Medicare for All and, universal single payer health care and high taxes and this, that, and the third. Right? So I'm Michael J. Long, and again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.